Welcome back to the show, everyone. On this week's episode, we have Jeff Smith, also known as a KPI guy. Jeff, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Vijay. I'm honored to be with you here today.
Of course, I really am grateful that you're here. And let's start with what is a KPI? People throw it around in business settings, but for all of us who don't understand it, what is KPI?
That's a great question. So, KPI, as you say, lots of people throw very loosely the term around. It means key performance indicator. So, what is a key performance indicator? So, they're predominantly used in business or recognized in business, I should say. But to be honest, Vijay, that everyone uses them every day of their lives without really recognizing what they are. So, we'll come to that side of it in a moment. But let's take the business angle. What is a key performance indicator? So, in business, we sell some stuff, we buy some stuff, and hopefully make a profit along the way, right? So, what key performance indicators do, they ask questions about specific areas of our business, key areas of our business. So, if we buy something and we sell something, a very basic key performance indicator you'll see first is the buying price or the selling price minus the buying price gives us our gross profit. But in volume terms, the monetary aspect doesn't allow us to compare one business with another because one business might sell 1 million widgets and another one might sell 100. So the monetary value and dealing with different currencies makes comparison pretty much impossible. So then we enter the world of key performance indicators. So it converts the activities that you're doing into percentages. So if you're selling 1 million widgets and you sell something for $15, for instance, and your buying price is $10, your gross profit would then be $5. So the gross profit percentage then would be that $5 gross profit divided by $15 turnover means 33%. So that means you can compare the product that you're selling and you're making 33% gross profit. Now you can compare that with someone who's selling 1 million widgets a day to someone who's selling 100 widgets a day. Because what you're really looking at in this case is, are you exploiting the marketplace with that product? What is the velocity, if you wish? How good are you in the buying price and the selling price? And what key performance indicators do is ask us questions about that activity. So in that case, gross profit at 33% asks us the question, how good are you at buying and selling that product in its marketplace compared with others? So there's one example, but key performance indicators, there are hundreds and hundreds of them. That's just one.
Okay, are KPIs always stated in percentage terms, or can they be anything?
Um, right. There's two questions there. Are they always in percentages? No, they're not. They measure different things in different times in different ways. For instance, if you have some stock, let's say you have $1 million worth of stock. What you really want to know is how many times do you use that stock in 1 year? So if you have $1 million worth of stock and $1 million in turnover at cost price, then you're using your stock once. So this is called stock turn. If you have $1 million worth of stock and you have $2 million of turnover, then you're turning your stock twice. If you've got $3 million of stock, then you're turning stock 3 times. Now, depending on the type of business that you're in, most businesses like a stock turn somewhere between 6 times a year to 10 times a year, depending upon the speed of the supply chain and things like that. So, to answer your question, are they all percentages? No. Profitability are always in percentages. The number of times we use our money is called stock turn or circulation. So it's really asking, there are different types of key performance indicators that ask us different kinds of questions about the activities within our business.
Got it. So what type of questions do these KPIs ask?
Well, that's up to you and what you want. So, the thing about business and personal goals, successful people know what they want. And to know what you want, you have to understand where you are now and then understand where you want to be at some point in the future. And what key performance indicators do, they fill the gap in the middle and they give you the roadmap to where you want to be. Now, let me give you some other examples of key performance indicators that you'll be more than familiar with. Have you ever sat inside of a motor car? Yeah, of course you have. So you look at the instrument panel, and there you have a dashboard full of key performance indicators. So one of the things you'll think about, I need to go from here and on a journey of 300 miles. How much fuel do I need for that? You look at your fuel gauge, right? That's a key performance indicator. So it's telling you whether you have enough fuel to get from where you are to where you want to be. And then you have a speedometer, a tachometer, and they're all key performance indicators to keep you on the right path.
That's such a great example. So you're using a business context, throwing it into everyday real world situations. So KPIs,
Yeah.
from what you've explained, is something that tells you where you currently are, where you're trying to get to, and whether you have enough resources to accomplish your goal.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely.
That's great. On your website, you mentioned something about the formula of success. What is that?
Ah, right. Now, you've jumped ahead a little. Let me try and rewind a little to put this into context. So, about 40 years ago, yeah, I'm an old guy. I I had a wonderful childhood. I won't say we were poor because I think that's a state of mind. We were broke. That's a state of pocket, right? So, my dad, he was a real clever engineer, did some amazing things around the world, but we didn't have any money. And I wondered, why is it my dad, such a clever guy, very well respected, doesn't have any money? And there are other people in the world who, perhaps not as skilled, not as called upon as my dad, had more money than my dad. Uh, why? How? How can that be? So I'm about 18 at the time, something like that. And I came up with this notion. I wanted to find out what makes a millionaire a millionaire. So I set about finding out. And the way I decided to do it was to interview millionaires. I then came to the conclusion, after I interviewed quite a few millionaires, that success is not just about money. Success covers a whole multitude of things. But at 18, it's money and $1 million, right? But I came across the notion. So I then had to define, well, what is success? And that's an interesting journey in itself. So over the next 20 years or so, I interviewed formally 325 combination of millionaires, billionaires, incredibly successful and famous people. And what I found out, they all do 11 things in common. That was fascinating. So I thought, if I copy these 11 steps and apply them to my own life, I wonder if I can also achieve success in my life. And for me, it's happened. So I was at high school, I failed at maths, I failed at English, and I then went on to write a book on mathematics. Wow. And I'm on record as the most successful author in history on the subject of key performance indicators and business strategy. How on earth does that happen? Vijay, I followed the 11 steps. It happened. So, what is the formula for success? What can I tell you after all of that? First thing, you're going to say, right, Jeff, what are the 11 steps? It's not that easy. So, I'll give you step one first, right? Are you ready?
I'm
Step
ready.
one. Step one, you must know what you want. 98% of people, and there's a key performance indicator, 98% of people cannot do it. So I hear lots of people talking about goal setting and things like this. And the major reason, what I found from successful people and those who are not quite as successful as they'd like to be, the one thing I found out was clarity. What is it they want? Now let me put this into context for you. People come talk to me and say, for instance, I'll ask them, "What do you want?" And they'll say, "I want more money." And most people say that, right? So here's what I do. I do it lightheartedly just to make emphasis on what this is about. So they say, "Jeff, I want to make more money." And I said, "Okay." So I put my hand in my pocket, I take out the dollar bill, I give it to them, and I say, "There you go, your dreams are fulfilled." So they go, "No, no, that's not what I mean. And you know that." And I say, "No, I don't know what you mean." And that's exactly the problem why you're not getting what you want. Because imagine this. I don't want to get into religion or anything like that. But let's say the universe. The universe delivers to you, but it can only give you what you ask for. So if you ask for more money, what are you asking for? I don't know. It's really too generic. So when I give someone a dollar bill, they've got more money than from before they ask the question. So yeah, their dreams are fulfilled. The difference with successful people, and here's what I found out from all the 325 interviews, a successful person would say something like this: I want $1 million, and I want that $1 million to be manifested on my bank account. So on the 12th of June 2023 at midday, I want to look at my bank account. I'll see a number of transactions, but one of them will be totaling up to $1 million. And that will be midday on the 12th of June 2023. And they're that specific. So once you've done that, Vijay, you can say, well, where am I now? How far away am I from that $1 million in my bank account? And how much time have I got to get there? Now, this is where your goal setting comes into play. You've done it. I want $1 million by the 12th of June, 2023. Now you're bringing key performance indicators because now you're asking, how am I going to do that? What is it in my life? What is it in my thinking? What is it in my doing that has to change that will enable me to deliver that $1 million on the 12th of June 2023? So, as you're asking those questions, then it's about examining what it is that you're doing and what you need to do to change in order to bring that goal to fruition. That is what successful people do. Those who are not successful say, "Hey, Jeff, I want more money." You understand the difference? And that is why 98% of people fail on their goals or they don't reach their goals because they're not specific enough in the first place. The other one is because they ask for the wrong thing. Now, what does that mean? Let me give you for an example on that. I've helped now 33 people to write a book. So I don't get involved with the words. I don't get involved with the content of the book. I just help them keep on pace with getting their book done within the timescale that they want it done. Keep the motivation going, keep them on track, things like that. So 33. I was speaking to an American lady about 6 weeks ago, and she said, "Jeff, I've invited to a show for a very specific reason." I said, "Okay, what's the reason?" And she said, "You're the best selling author in history of all time in your chosen field. I've also found out that you're self published. How on earth have you taken on the publishing world in its entirety and just beaten them at their own game and writing a book on mathematics. It just, how on earth did you do that? So I'll call her Christine because that's her name. So I said, Christine, I said, why are you asking me the question? As I detect that there's some underlying interest as to why you asked me. She said, yeah, sure, there is. Of course, there is. She said, I want some guidance on writing a book. I said, okay. Why do you want to write a book? And she said, oh, actually, I've already written a book. I want some guidance on how to write my second book. And I said, well, if you've written a book already, what do you need me for? She said, well, because I've written a book, I've had it printed, and now I have a garage full of books. Nobody buys them. And I said, right, okay. Now it comes to the point. Vijay, here's the point. I said, Christine, what was your goal? Explain it to me. She said, I wanted to write a book. And I said, then your goal was fulfilled. Your goal was not to write a book that sells. Your goal was never to be world number one. Your goal was to write a book. And we were on video having this conversation. And she put her head in her hands. Tears were coming down her face. She said, I get it now. I've done it all wrong. And I said, Christine, I don't think you've done it wrong. The universe has helped you deliver exactly what you asked for. You wanted to write a book, and you wrote one. You should celebrate your success. Once you'd written the book, you didn't change your goal. You didn't celebrate your goal. You didn't then have another goal to ask the universe how to sell the book. But that would have been the wrong way round anyway. Now, here's some advice from me for anyone who's thinking about writing a book. I've helped 33 people write a book, and they've all been incredibly successful. So, writing a book is easy. Selling the bugger is the difficult thing. So, before you write a book, what I do, I create the advertisement for the book. And then I share the advertisements with a few people and say, hey, Vijay, what do you think about this? I'm writing this book. Would this be of interest? What's of interest to you? And then you get comments, yeah, no, and I'd prefer this or that. And then you get some real good feedback on what the market wants. So I refined this advertisement over and over again until I showed it to people and they were going, wow, when will that be available? And of course, I've not even started yet. So if you consider this, if you can consider Christine's goal with my goal, what I had done, I'd created an advertisement for a book, knowing what people in that market wanted. So what I did right from the outset, once I started writing, I was writing a book that people wanted. And my writing style and the way it put together had to match the advertisement. What Christine did, she wrote a book, as most other people do. She wrote a book that she wanted to write for herself and then tried to sell it. Doesn't work that way. So create the sales first. Understand what people want. Create that killer advert that excites you, and then your book must match the advert. Then you're writing a book that people want rather than writing a book that you want to write.
That's an amazing amount of wealth of knowledge you just gave all of us just now. So let's back up a little bit. You mentioned a lot of things. About 98% of people.
I'm sorry about that.
No, I loved it. I loved
I do
it.
get excited.
You mentioned 98% of people cannot do this, and it's because they're not setting specific enough goals.
Yeah, far too
And
generic.
And I think you drove a great point home there. Was that number one out of the 11, or is that
No,
multiple of
no.
the 11?
Step number one is, what do you want? Define what you want. And what I'm saying is, most people cannot do it, or they ask for the wrong thing.
Got it. So now let's move on to step number two. What would that be?
Write it down with absolute clarity. Absolute, and I don't mean type it out on a keyboard. Something happens between your brain and your pen when you're writing down. So when you write it down, when I did the goal for my book, I wrote it down as step number 3. Read it, review, react, revise. Keep changing it until it's right. And you'll know when it's right. When you just keep on refining, keep changing. It might be a word. Just keep refining it until you've got it absolutely nailed. Then you can start working on what it is you want to do. People start off too generic and going a general direction. And it top achievers are laser beam focused. There's no drift to the left or the right. And it comes from knowing what you want. Step 2 is write it down with clarity. Step 3, review, react, revise. Review, react, revise. Keep rewriting until you've absolutely got it clear in your mind. And that process, as I said, for me, takes 3 months. Should not be underestimated.
That's great. Now let's move on to step number 4, because
I'm not
I mean,
going to, I'm not going to step 4
you're not
because
going to. Oh,
no, I'm not going to step 4 because unless you can do step 1, step 2, step 3, there's no point doing step 4. Absolutely no point. So there's some things in there you wouldn't understand until you've gone through the pain and emotion of step 1, step 2, step 3. So what we can do, if you wish, we can do another program at some point in the future. Maybe some listeners now will say, right, I'm going to do what you've said and complete step 1, step 2, step 3. Maybe, here's an idea. Somebody can say, okay, here's my step 1, step 2, step 3. What do I do next? What is step 4? Because now it begins to get a little more context sensitive, where step 1, step 2, and step 3 are quite generic. Now it starts to get a little bit more specific. So if someone wants to come on the show in the future and we want to talk about it and talk about goals and whether it's specific enough, here's another secret I'll share with you. The brain cannot accept a negative context. What does that mean? Now, when we talk about a positive person or a negative person, I don't mean that. A negative context is that the brain cannot accept or nor can it understand something that you do not want. Let me give you an example. So, get ready now. Do not think of a red car. Don't do it. What just happened?
I thought about a red car.
You thought about a red car. And that's because the brain cannot take the negative context. So it can only take the context of the sentence, which is red car. So when you say, do not think about a red car, here's what happens. When people set their goals or when they're thinking about success, if they think, oh, I hope this doesn't happen. So the brain doesn't get that. It's like, don't think of a red car. Because you don't have the dialogue to come back to yourself and say, okay, you don't want a red car. So tell me, what do you want instead? Our brain doesn't have that capacity. So you're forced then to think about the red car. And this is so the brain cannot deal with the negative context of a sentence. Now, if you want to explore this, go onto Google or any other search engine and type in there, do not show me a pink elephant. What's going to come up? A pink elephant, because it doesn't understand the do not. It doesn't have the ability to come back to you and say, okay, Vijay, you don't want to see a pink elephant. Tell me, what do you want to see instead? It doesn't do that. So the only thing it can do is show you a pink elephant. So next time you have a couple of minutes after the show, go onto Google, type in do not show me X, and watch what happens. The point is, that's what happens in our lives. And whatever you think about, here's the point, whether you want it or not, will manifest. Don't show me a red car. Oh, look, there's a red car. Because we don't have the capacity to come back and say, what do you want instead? So if you go through life thinking, I hope this doesn't happen, what's going to happen? It happens, you know? And I don't play golf, but I've been out with some friends who play golf. We're on the 14th tee. To the one side of the tee, there's a lake. They put the ball on the tee. This is how the amateur golfer plays. And they think, I hope I don't go in the lake. So they tee up to the ball. They swing. What happens? The ball goes in the lake. And then they say, I knew that was going to happen. Why did the ball go in the lake? Because what happens, they're communicating to their brain, I don't want it to go in the lake. Now, to know what they don't want, they have to visualize it, and their muscle memory has to go through the pattern in order for the brain to understand it. So when they hit the ball, no surprise, the ball goes in the lake. The professional golfer on the same tee puts the ball onto the tee, doesn't even see the lake, sees the point up ahead. I want the ball to land right there. Bang, and it goes right there. So, whatever you think about in your life will be delivered to you, whether you want it or not. And that's why. Because the brain and the universe doesn't have the capacity to come back to you to say, oh, if you don't want that, what do you want instead? So it can only deliver what you're thinking about.
That's a great reflection. So when people are setting goals and trying to analyze risk before, I guess, jumping into a business venture, where's the fine line between realizing, oh, this is actually really just dumb compared to, hey, let me try to avoid it so I could focus on this profitable area of this business?
That's a really generic question now. So, as a businessman myself, I'd want a real specific context to answer that question. So, assessing risk, if you start thinking, I don't want this to happen, I don't want that to happen, Vijay, what's going to happen? It's going to happen, right? So, it's about understanding risk, and the way to reposition this, rather than thinking, I don't want to go in that direction because bad things will happen, what do you think instead? I want to make sure I maintain this course because I want this to happen. It's like the golfer completely avoiding and not recognizing the lake. They just look ahead.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you for that. So going back to that business example, what are three of the biggest mistakes that you see entrepreneurs or business owners make?
Okay. So the first one, inertia. What does inertia mean? This is the reluctance to change direction. It means, yeah, I know I should change, but I'm not going to. I know what's happening in the market and I know I should, but I'm going to carry on what I'm doing. The 7 most expensive words in business. You ready? But we've always done it this way. So when you're trying to make change happen in the workplace and you hear that, that's inertia right there. So what companies do we know that have suffered from inertia? I'll come on to that in a while. So that's the first one. The second one is procrastination. I'll talk about that one tomorrow. So procrastination means, yeah,
that
it
was
means
good.
it means Yes, I know I should change, but I've got some other stuff to deal with right now. I will get round to it, just not right at this moment. Maybe tomorrow. I just need to get this other stuff out of the way. So, does change happen? Does it manifest? Generally not, or a little bit might happen, and then the world just passes you by. So, that's the second. So, the first one is inertia, a refusal to change. Second one is procrastination. I know I should, but I'll get to it in a moment. And then the third one is the really dangerous one. This one is new paradigms. And let me explain what a paradigm is first. 500 years ago, people believed the world was flat. And I can really relate to that. I mean, why wouldn't you without the knowledge of science? You know, I've often stood on the beach and I've looked out to the ocean, and you look at the horizon and you think, yep, if I sailed on a ship, I'll fall over the edge. And I can really understand why people would think that. So that was their beliefs only 500 years ago. Then Copernicus and Galileo come along and provide all the science and say, hey, planet Earth, this thing that we live on, is actually spherical. It's round, and this thing called gravity that keeps us on it. Wow, this is a new paradigm. So now the belief system from believing that the world is flat is shattered. And you've got evidence to prove the world is no longer flat. So this is a new paradigm. It means whatever you thought to be true is no longer true. And here's the evidence to prove it. Now, when we get all three in action, then you have some incredible things happening in the world. You heard of a company called Kodak? Yeah. Okay. So, what did Kodak do? They were, because they don't exist now, they went bust, right? Big time they went bust. So, Kodak were the number one players in the world for photographic paper and photographic chemicals. The absolute best, leading edge. But then a new paradigm happened: digital imagery. We store images online now. But Kodak refused to accept this new paradigm, and they created better photographic paper, better chemicals. But the problem is, no one wanted to buy them. So they refused to accept this new paradigm, suffered from inertia, refused to change. Guess what happened? They go bust. I mean, I can't remember the last time I printed a photograph. And one of my main hobbies is photography. Yet Kodak carried on. So that's why they go bust. And there are many companies, I mean, there are many through coronavirus as well, that have refused to accept the changes that have happened, not recognize the new paradigm, suffer from inertia, go bust. Now, here's the interesting thing: going back to Kodak, they were the company who invented the camera, the first mass produced camera. So, Henry Ford didn't invent the motor car. What he did, he was the first to produce the plant that made mass production of cars possible and affordable for everyone. Kodak did the same. They made the Kodak Brownie and got the camera, put film in, you print, wonderful. But what happened? A little later in time, someone invented the digital camera and digital photo sharing, and that was the killer for Kodak. Do you know who invented the digital camera and digital photo sharing?
I don't.
Get ready for this one. It was Kodak. Yeah, the irony. So they created the new paradigm but refused to understand what it was. I mean, not so very long ago, you probably owned a video recorder with VHS tapes in it. There are companies that continue to make better quality videotapes. They go bust. vinyl records. There was a company, a huge company, the world over called Yellow Pages. Right, used to come out every year, sell it advertising space. They go bust. No one needs Yellow Pages anymore. The typewriter. There's another one. Brother were the company who made the best, arguably the best typewriters in the world. The last typewriter was manufactured by them in 2012, and it was immediately given as an artifact to a museum. Who buys a typewriter anymore? Why would we? So, so the three big mistakes in business. One is inertia. I know I should change, but I refuse. I'm not going to. And you will hear when you try to implement change into your own organization, you'll hear employees say, "But we've always done it this way." People don't like change. We only change when we have to. That's the thing about change. That's number one. The second one, I'll remind you, procrastination. Yeah, I'll get round to it. And then number three is the real big dangerous one. It's when your beliefs about what you believe to be true are no longer valid. Something comes along, changes the world.
Thank you for that. How would business owners combat number three? I think number one and two, it's more of your mind, not to procrastinate and trying to realize, hey, let me keep an open mind. But how do you know that there's a new paradigm shift without compromising your previous business?
Without compromising. So, without compromising, you have to compromise. That's the thing. The world has changed. What you believe to be true is no longer true. No one wants Kodak paper. They had to compromise. They didn't. All of it is a mental state. All of it. So you have to be aware that new paradigms exist, and you have to look for them within your industry. For instance, do you know the age of the average millionaire nowadays?
No.
14.
14 is the average.
1 4, 14. That's the average, which means we've got 10-year-old